She spent her whole life working to raise her grandson. Just another shift at the diner. Until one man decided to humiliate her in the worst way possible. But he had no idea who was standing nearby and what would happen next. Comment below what you would do in her place, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Ronda Rousey had always believed that even on ordinary mornings, life had a way of placing extraordinary choices in front of you. She just never expected one of those mornings to begin with a quiet cup of coffee, the soft buzz of a tired diner, and a grandmother who refused to let exhaustion take away her kindness. The sun was barely up when Ronda pulled her hoodie tighter around herself and stepped out of her car, parked at the edge of the lot near a flickering street lamp. She'd come straight from her gym a few miles away, an early training session that left her body warm and her mind relaxed. The day was supposed to be simple: a quick breakfast at a local place, then a drive to a charity event, sign autographs for kids, give a short motivational speech, take a few photos, make a small difference in someone's day. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would demand the side of her that once fought in cages and threw opponents to the ground hard enough to shake the world. The sign above the diner's entrance glowed a soft neon red. Rosewood Diner, open 24 hours. It was the kind of place that smelled like sizzling bacon and fresh coffee no matter the time of day. The kind of place where truck drivers and nurses and factory workers all sat shoulder to shoulder, filling the booths with the shared silence of people just trying to get through life one cup of caffeine at a time. Ronda liked places like that. Real places full of real people. She slipped inside and immediately felt the warmth of the diner wrap around her. The morning rush hadn't quite hit yet, leaving several booths empty. Soft music hummed from overhead speakers, and the quiet clatter of dishes from the kitchen blended into a comforting background rhythm. Ronda took a seat at the counter, near the end close enough to the kitchen to smell whatever was cooking, but far enough away to stay unnoticed, just how she liked it. The waitress approached with a smile that didn't quite mask the tiredness in her eyes. She moved slowly, like someone whose joints had been telling stories for years. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun streaked with silver, and she wore her uniform like armor, clean, pressed, proud. The name tag pinned neatly on her chest read, Rebecca. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, with a voice that carried warmth, not routine. "Coffee?" "Yes, please," Ronda replied, smiling back. "Black." Rebecca nodded, poured her a cup with steady hands, and slid it gently in front of her. "You headed to work this early?" Ronda chuckled softly. "Something like that." Rebecca didn't seem to recognize her, and that alone made the morning feel easier. Fame could be heavy. Some days anonymity tasted better than any breakfast on the menu. Rebecca didn't pry. She just moved on to the next customer, checking on a pair of road-worn travelers in a booth. Ronda watched as she spoke to them. Kindness in the small gestures, the attention to detail. Extra napkins before they asked. A gentle hand on an older man's shoulder as she poured his coffee. She cared, and not the fake kind people put on for tips. It was real. Ronda sipped her drink, letting the rich warmth settle into her chest. From where she sat, she could see everything in the diner, including the framed photos near the kitchen door. Employee of the month pictures. Different customers, different seasons, but the same woman each time. The same weary smile, the same determination. Rebecca Carter, employee of the month more times than anyone else probably ever would be. Ronda admired strength in all its forms. Not just the kind that threw punches or survived chokes, but the kind that woke up at 4 a.m., despite exhaustion, that chose kindness instead of spite, that fought silent wars no one else saw. As she took another sip, Rebecca returned, drying her hands on her apron. "You need a menu, or you already know what you want." "I'll take whatever breakfast you recommend," Ronda said. Rebecca's eyes sparkled just slightly. She appreciated that kind of trust. "Okay then, no fancy stuff, just good eggs, bacon, and toast. Sound all right?" "Perfect," Ronda replied. Rebecca scribbled the order and walked toward the kitchen window to clip it up. As she did, Ronda noticed a tiny flicker of pain cross the woman's face, a stiffness in her movements as though her back burned with effort after years of labor. "3 jobs," Ronda overheard a voice from the grill whisper. "Lady should be resting instead of running herself into the ground." Rebecca brushed the comment away with a small wave of her hand and continued working. She wasn't someone who let others worry about her. She was a fighter, just a different kind. Rhonda glanced outside as a luxury black Bentley rolled arrogantly into the parking lot. Taking up two handicapped spots like lines on the pavement meant nothing. The driver didn't adjust or correct, just shut the door and strutted inside like he expected applause. Even before he reached the entrance, Rhonda could feel the shift in the room. Some people carried a darkness, not because they were hurting, but because they believed others were beneath them. This man's slick-backed hair, designer suit, ego bigger than the diner had that presence. Confidence without humility, power without compassion. He stormed inside, phone glued to his ear, barking into it at whoever was unlucky enough to be on the other end. "I don't care how much they cry," he snapped. "We're moving forward. Evict every last one of them. If they can't afford the rent, that's not my problem." He didn't lower his voice. He wanted people to hear. He wanted to be noticed. Rhonda felt her jaw tighten. He pointed at a booth, but didn't wait to be seated. He simply took it, dragging his equally miserable-looking assistant behind him. When Rebecca approached, he didn't acknowledge her, not even a glance. Just continued speaking loudly about forcing families out of their homes and laughed like human suffering entertained him. Rebecca, patient beyond reason, still poured his coffee with steady hands. "That's lukewarm garbage," the man growled seconds later, pushing the cup away like it disgusted him. He chastised Rebecca loudly, drawing attention. She apologized, gentle and professional, and took the cup back to the kitchen to brew a new pot. Rhonda's fingers tightened around her own mug. She didn't like bullies, and she especially didn't like when they picked on someone kind. She exhaled, reminding herself it wasn't her fight. Not yet. The door opened again, this time letting in the rumble of motorcycle engines. 10 Harleys filled the lot before riders stepped inside, one by one. Leather vests, worn jeans, boots that looked like they'd seen every highway in the country. People turned to look, some curious, others intimidated. But Rhonda saw them differently. They walked with the disciplined coordination of a team. Broad shoulders, steady posture, eyes scanning the room, not for threats but to understand it. Their leader, Victor, nodded politely at Rebecca and requested booth 7, the same one closest to the kitchen, the easiest for her to reach. Respect in small things. Rebecca smiled, her shoulders relaxing slightly as she escorted them to the booth. They thanked her. Gratitude in small things. Rhonda looked at them, then back at the businessman who saw service workers as disposable. Two worlds under one roof. She reached for her coffee again, watching, because she knew something was coming. Moments like this always led somewhere. The universe had a funny way of lining up the right people at the right time. And though Rhonda didn't know how yet, she felt it deep in her bones. Today wasn't just any day. There was a storm forming inside that diner, one of arrogance, cruelty, and power pressing against a quiet wall of dignity and compassion. Some storms were made to break. Rhonda lifted her cup and took a slow sip, eyes trained on Rebecca as the woman walked back toward the wealthy man's booth with a freshly brewed pot still carrying kindness, as though the world hadn't tried to crush it out of her. This morning would test that kindness, and when it did, Ronda Rousey would be ready. She always was. Rebecca returned to the arrogant man's booth with the new coffee, doing everything right. She held the pot carefully, pausing for just a second to offer the polite smile she gave every customer. But standing this close, she could now smell the expensive cologne he wore. Something sharp and artificial, a scent that seemed to announce how much better he believed he was than everyone around him. He finally ended his phone call with an annoyed sigh, as if breathing the same air as the rest of the diner was a burden he could barely tolerate. Rebecca poured slowly, ensuring the cup was filled just to the edge, the way she'd done for 15 years. Before she could even place the pot back on the table platform, he snatched the cup, took one sip, and let out an exaggerated groan that echoed through the diner. "You call that hot?" he barked. "This is the second time." He slammed the cup so hard that coffee splashed up and sprinkled onto the table, making Rebecca take an instinctive step back. The assistant flinched, but said nothing, terror already painted in his tired eyes. The businessman leaned forward, sneering up at her. "Do you even know what a thermometer is? Or do they only let you handle the cheap things here, like pouring coffee and making mistakes? His voice carried, loud, sharp, humiliating. People turned their heads. Conversations halted. The nurses stared. The construction workers frowned. Rhonda placed her coffee down before she crushed the ceramic between her fingers. Even the bikers had gone quiet in booth 7, their bodies tensing slightly like hounds that had just caught the scent of danger. Rebecca's smile faded, not completely, but enough that the room felt colder. Still, she held herself steady. "I'm very sorry, sir. I'll brew another pot. If you prefer tea, I can—" He stood up abruptly, cutting her off. He wasn't tall, but he pushed himself into her space, towering with arrogance rather than height. His voice dropped into a venomous whisper meant only for her, but heard by everyone. "Do you know who I am? I could buy this entire place, including you." Those words slapped harder than a hand ever could. Rhonda's jaw clenched. The knuckles on her fist whitened. She had stood face to face with monsters in cages, champions, legends, and never felt the same surge of fury she felt looking at this smug little man. Rebecca stepped back, still calm. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She simply turned to walk away. And that tiny act of dignity, was what made the man decide he needed to destroy her. He grabbed the cup of coffee, a fresh, steaming cup, and with a short, violent flick of his wrist, he hurled the scalding liquid straight into her face. The result was almost soundless. At first, a moment of stunned silence before a gasp of absolute agony tore from Rebecca's throat. She stumbled back, hands flying up to her burning cheeks, her breath broken into sharp, painful sobs as the hot liquid soaked into her skin, neck, and uniform. Rhonda was on her feet instantly, the stool clattering backward. The businessman laughed. He actually laughed, a cruel, self-satisfied chuckle, as if he had just exposed how ridiculous he believed she was. "That's what happened," he said loudly, "when people like you don't know your place." He tossed a $100 bill onto the table with 2 condescending fingers. The bill floated down like a piece of trash. Rebecca's knees buckled. She collapsed behind the counter, shaking, choking on sobs, her skin an angry red. The cook burst out from the kitchen with a bucket of ice, hands trembling as he tried to help her. A nurse rushed to Rebecca's side, shouting over her shoulder for someone to call an ambulance. But nobody moved toward the businessman. Nobody stopped him, because 10 leather vests and 1 former UFC champion were already doing that. The man turned with a casual arrogance, smoothing his jacket sleeves, as if he had just completed a task. He expected the door to open. He expected the world to kneel beneath his shoes. Instead, his path was blocked by Victor, the leader of the bikers. Behind him, the rest of his crew rose in unison, like a silent wall of justice. They formed a semicircle around the man, blocking every direction he could possibly run. Rhonda stepped forward too, moving not fast but purposeful, the way a predator moves when the prey has already doomed itself. She didn't need to run. She didn't need to shout. She let her presence carry the consequence. The businessman swallowed hard, his false bravado faltering for the first time. What do you think you're doing, Horshraini?" he stammered. No one answered yet. They didn't need to. Rhonda knelt beside Rebecca first. Her hands, once meant for grappling and striking, moved with surprising tenderness as she took a clean cloth from the cook and carefully dabbed the burns. "Rebecca, it's okay, I'm here," she whispered. "You're going to be all right. We're calling help." Rebecca trembled violently, tears streaking down her already injured cheeks. The nurse beside Rhonda nodded in approval at the care being given. Rhonda turned her head just slightly, eyes locking on the businessman, and her voice carried ice sharp enough to slice bone. "What you did," she said slowly, "is going to cost you more than you've ever paid for anything in your life." He laughed again, a brittle, freezing sound. Fear was creeping in, but his arrogance still fought to keep control. "You can't do anything to me," he scoffed, louder this time, hoping his voice could regain dominance. "I'll have every one of you arrested, especially you," he pointed directly at Rhonda. "You violent types. You don't scare me." That was the exact moment his assistant, the young man who had been silent and cowed all morning, finally broke. He stood up, voice shaking but loud enough to matter. She did nothing wrong. You burned her. You laughed. You've been doing this to everyone. I won't be a part of it anymore. The businessman turned, shocked, betrayal carved into his expression. You ungrateful! Shut your mouth, Victor growled. The two words hit like a verbal punch. Victor stepped closer, his shadow tall and unmovable. His eyes, calm, steady, full of a lifetime's experience, locked onto the man's. Sit down. It wasn't a suggestion. The businessman opened his mouth and then closed it again. Slowly, stiffly, he obeyed, lowering himself back into the booth like his bones had turned to glass. Rhonda's hands shook, not with fear, but with contained fury as she focused on Rebecca again. The burns were blistering. The pain was obvious. Still, Rebecca tried to speak, her voice a thin whisper. My grandson. I can't miss work. I need... No, Rhonda said, firm yet gentle. You don't worry about anything except breathing and healing. We're going to take care of everything else. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance now, growing louder. The businessman tried to latch onto that sound for confidence. You're all finished, he hissed, voice trembling as sweat gathered on his brow. I'll destroy... He didn't finish. Rhonda stood up, stepping forward, towering over him, even without trying. Her eyes darkened with a look she only reserved for the worst kind of opponent. A look that once made champions doubt themselves inside UFC cages. You already destroyed yourself, she said quietly. You just finally did it in front of witnesses. His lips pressed together, fear cutting deeper than pain ever could. Police rushed through the door next. Paramedics followed. The officers took one look at the scene, the burns, the shaken witnesses, the coffee stains, the trembling girl clinging to Rhonda's arm, and they didn't hesitate. The businessman was handcuffed. He protested, of course, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits and status. But his words fell flat in a room full of people who had watched his cruelty unfold. As they read him his rights, Rhonda helped the paramedics gently lift Rebecca onto a stretcher. I'll come to the hospital, she promised, squeezing Rebecca's hand. You're not alone. The grandmother, her voice raw with pain, managed a tiny, heartfelt whisper. Thank you, Rhonda. That was the first time she said her name. The ambulance doors closed, and Rhonda turned slowly toward the police car, where the man who thought he owned the world now trembled behind reinforced glass. As the biker crew looked to her, waiting, ready, committed, she exhaled once. This wasn't over, not until she made sure justice did more than arrive. It needed to hurt, and Ronda Rousey understood better than most how to deliver pain to those who deserved it. The ambulance doors had barely shut before paramedics began working faster, adjusting tubes, applying different burn dressings, and monitoring Rebecca's pulse as the vehicle pulled away from the diner. The sirens weren't blaring. Her life wasn't in immediate danger, but the urgency was unmistakable. Every sharp jolt of the ambulance on the uneven road sent a fresh wave of fire across her skin. The tears weren't from fear anymore. They were from the brutal sting of burns that cut deeper than flesh, humiliation that clawed into the soul. Her breathing was shallow, labored, but there was a hand wrapped around hers, firm, steady. Rhonda had climbed into the ambulance without asking permission, and no one there had questioned it. The medics recognized her instantly, and not just from fame, from the look in her eyes, protective, deadly serious. Rebecca tried to speak but flinched when the motion stretched the tender skin of her neck. Rhonda shook her head gently. Shh, breathe, I'm right here. But Rebecca insisted, pushing the pain aside with stubborn strength she had developed over years of surviving hardship. My grandson, Danny, they'll call the school. He'll be scared. Rhonda squeezed her hand harder. I'll make sure he's okay. I promise. Rebecca blinked painfully, lids heavy and wet. You don't even know me. Rhonda leaned closer, her voice soft but fierce. I didn't need to know your name to know that you deserve respect. And now I know exactly who you are, and I'm not going anywhere. Rebecca's lips quivered, not from agony this time, from gratitude she didn't have the strength to speak aloud. At the hospital entrance, nurses were waiting with a stretcher already prepared. Doors flung open. the cold morning air rushing in. The hallway lights above seemed bright enough to stab at her swollen eyes. Everything blurred into shapes and sounds. Voices echoing, wheels rolling, beeping monitors, all rushing past faster than she could process. They transferred her gently into a burn treatment room. The antiseptic scent was sterile, sharp. A doctor, young, calm, and efficient, introduced herself as Dr. Patel before examining the damage. Her expression tightened with every new discovery. Second-degree burns across both cheeks and the jawline, she reported to a nurse. Partial third-degree involvement here. She traced a line above Rebecca's collarbone, careful not to touch. And here, lower cheek, PrEP silver sulfatazine, will need pain relief and sedation. Rhonda stayed at Rebecca's side, taking in every word. She trained herself to recognize pain, used to mastering it, inflicting it, controlling it. But this was different. This wasn't a punch you could block or a submission you could tap out of. This was cruelty someone chose to inflict on a woman who had already carried too much pain for one lifetime. As they applied medication, Rebecca grit her teeth. The sting was unbearable. A nurse gently brushed a tear from her uninjured cheek. "You're doing great," the nurse said. "We're right here." Rebecca nodded faintly, exhausted. While doctors worked, Rhonda stepped into the hallway to take a breath. She slipped her phone from her pocket, scrolling quickly for the number of her manager. Someone who handled media, press, and public chaos better than anyone. This story wasn't going to be buried. She wouldn't let it. But before she could dial, the elevator doors opened and 10 pairs of boots stepped out. The bikers from the diner. Their leather jackets seemed to darken the sterile brightness of the hospital. They weren't loud. They didn't swagger. They simply stood tall and purposeful, a wall of resolve. Victor approached first. His eyes studied Rhonda's expression carefully. "How is she?" "In pain, but she's strong," Rhonda answered. "Doctors say burns aren't life-threatening, but she'll need time and support." "You've got that covered," Hammer rumbled, crossing his massive arms. "That bastard is never seeing another sunrise without regret." Rhonda nodded in agreement. "He's arrested, but legal fights take time. And while that happens, we're going to take care of Rebecca." Victor exchanged a glance with his crew. Silent agreement. "We'll cover her medical cost if needed," he said. "All of it. And if anything threatens her job or her grandson's treatment, we'll handle that too." Rhonda glanced at the closed treatment room door. The first thing she worried about wasn't the pain. It was Danny, he's 8, leukemia. Her voice hardened. That man targeted someone who already carries the world on her back. Victor's jaw tightened. Then the world is going to carry her now. For a moment, Rhonda felt the sudden thickness of emotion in her chest. She wasn't someone who cried easily, but seeing these people, strangers, show such fierce loyalty to a woman they'd barely met reminded her of the power of chosen family. Before they continued, a doctor stepped out, removing gloves. "We're transferring her to a private recovery room," Dr. Patel said. "We'll need to monitor her for dehydration and stress-related shock. But she's stable. She'll be awake once medication settles." "Can we see her?" Rhonda asked. "In small groups," the doctor replied. "One at a time for now." As nurses moved Rebecca to a new room, the assistant from the diner arrived, out of breath and pale. He lingered near the door, clutching his briefcase like a life vest. Rhonda recognized him instantly, the softly spoken young man who had finally stood up to the businessman. He looked terrified, guilt etched into every line of his face. I needed to see if she's okay," he managed. I should have stopped him sooner." Rhonda stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You stood up when it mattered," she told him. "Don't minimize that." He swallowed hard. "The police want my statement. I told them I'd give everything. Years of emails, recordings." He was proud of what he did to people. Too proud to hide it. Rhonda nodded in approval. "Then you're helping make sure he never does this again." The assistant tried to smile, but it trembled. "Thank you," he whispered, then looked down. "For helping her when the rest of us froze." "We're not done helping her," Rhonda said. "Not by a long shot." Inside the recovery room, Rebecca lay beneath soft white sheets, breathing slowly. Much of her face was bandaged, but her eyes fluttered open as Rhonda entered quietly. You didn't Have to stay, Rebecca murmured through the haze of medication. Rhonda pulled a chair close and sat, resting her hands lightly on the edge of the bed. I did, because you matter, and because no one should go through something like this alone. Rebecca's eyes filled again, not from pain, but from disbelief that after so many years of invisibility, someone saw her, truly saw her. My Danny, he doesn't have anyone else, she whispered. Just me. Now he has more, Rhonda said gently. You have us, all of us. The grandmother swallowed hard, her voice barely a breath. Thank you. Rhonda exhaled slowly, steadying her own heart. We'll make sure he feels safe. I'll talk to him, explain everything in a way he can understand. Rebecca nodded, relief washing over her. Then came a quiet knock, and the door opened just enough for Victor to peek in. When Rhonda motioned, he approached, standing respectfully at the foot of the bed. His imposing presence, somehow softened by the gentleness in his expression. We've already arranged for your medical bills, he said. We'll take care of everything. Focus on healing. Rebecca's lips trembled again. Why? You don't even know me. Victor shook his head slowly. You're a person. That's all we need to know. Her tears finally spilled, emotion breaking through whatever strength she had used to hold herself together. And the man who did this? She asked, voice faint. Rhonda's expression darkened with controlled fury. He's in custody, but legal justice isn't the only kind. He's going to see consequences from every angle. We're going to make sure his world feels smaller than he ever made yours. Rebecca closed her eyes, exhaustion taking over, but her hand didn't let go of Rhonda's. As she drifted into sleep, Rhonda, Victor, and the bikers silently vowed the same promise. They would not rest until that man understood, truly understood, that respect cannot be bought, but cruelty always comes with a price. Rhonda stood and stepped into the hall again. The adrenaline from earlier had faded slightly, replaced by a deep, heavy determination. It wasn't enough to just see that man arrested. People like him avoided true consequences all the time, hiding behind lawyers and loopholes. But today he had attacked the wrong woman. Rhonda pulled out her phone again, finally dialing her manager. As soon as he answered, she spoke with complete calm, each word measured and sharp. We're going public with this, she said. Every detail, every witness. I want his face everywhere. Rhonda paused, staring down the long hallway where the police and bikers were discussing statements. And one more thing, she added. Make sure no one forgets her name. Her name is Rebecca Carter. She hung up the phone. This battle was only beginning, and Ronda Rousey was not a woman who backed down. Rebecca slept under the soft glow of the hospital room's dim light, the slow rhythm of her breathing steadier now than when she had first arrived. Pain medication kept most of the agony at bay, and exhaustion had finally granted her some peace. Rhonda remained close, quietly observing every rise and fall of Rebecca's chest, while nurses worked through their shifts outside. The day that had started with a casual breakfast had turned into a war, and one in which she had already chosen her side. The police arrived in Rebecca's room around mid-afternoon, announcing themselves with a gentle knock. A female officer led the pair, her voice respectful. She kept her distance to avoid overwhelming the patient, but needed a few clarifications for the report. Rebecca stirred weakly, nodding along to every question she could manage. She pushed herself to stay awake long enough to confirm the truth. Every detail needed to be right. The assistant provided witness statements as well, trembling slightly as he described what he had seen. His voice cracked when he repeated the moment the coffee splashed onto Rebecca's face, the room falling still as the horror of it replayed in every mind. Only after the officers left did Rhonda slip out of the room to track down the detective handling the case. Detective Maria Alvarez, a woman with stern eyes and posture that spoke of years spent dealing with the worst kinds of people. She stood in the hallway reviewing notes on her tablet. He's already calling lawyers. Alvarez sighed without looking up. Men like him don't panic until they realize their money won't silence what they did. Make sure it doesn't, Rhonda said firmly. He did this because he was certain he could get away with it. Alvarez finally lifted her gaze, recognizing exactly who she was speaking to. He underestimated the wrong woman today. 2 women, Rhonda corrected, nodding toward the room behind them. Alvarez allowed herself a thin smile. We're charging him with felony assault and hate crime enhancements. Cameras inside the diner caught most of the confrontation. And the assistant? She glanced at her notes. He has years of documented harassment and illegal conduct. This is no longer just about today. Rhonda felt something warm ignite inside her chest. Good. Let it all come out. While legal wheels began to turn, another battle raged elsewhere. In a holding cell across town, Richard Pembroke sat on a narrow bench, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained with coffee, a humiliating echo of what he had thrown at Rebecca. His hair, always immaculately styled, was now disheveled. He tapped his foot rapidly, pacing the small room like a predator trapped in its own arrogance. He had spent years building a world where people existed only to serve him. Employees, clerks, waiters. They were invisible until they made a mistake. Then they were targets. Today, he had targeted the wrong one. "How long do I have to stay in this dump?" he barked as though speaking to hired staff. The officer outside glanced at him with a flat expression. "Until your lawyer finishes paperwork for your bail hearing. Maybe longer." Richard scoffed. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The officer leaned back in his chair. "Right now, inmate 43819. Richard banged his fist against the bars. "This is ridiculous. That old woman exaggerated." The officer stood abruptly, stepping toward the cell with slow, deliberate intent. His voice dropped to a cold whisper. "I saw the footage." Richard's jaw froze. That was the moment fear cracked through his anger. Real fear, the kind that spread from the gut outward, cold and unfamiliar to a man who had never suffered consequences. Before the officer stepped back, he added one more sentence. "You should pray she survives without permanent damage, because if she doesn't, your life changes forever." Richard looked away, throat dry, repeating to himself like a lifeline. "She's fine. She'll be fine. They're just overreacting." But even he didn't believe it. Back at the hospital, Rhonda took a break from the buzzing chaos to find a snack machine down the hall. A bitter, exhausted laugh escaped her when the first machine swallowed her dollar. She hit the coin return button twice and nothing. Most days she would have smirked and bought another. Today she kicked the machine. "Atta girl," a voice chuckled from behind. It was Victor. He approached with 2 cups of coffee in hand. One for her, one for himself. The thoughtfulness surprised her. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering the cup. "Black, right?" Rhonda blinked. "You guessed. You strike me as someone who doesn't like her coffee messed with," he replied. She accepted it with a small nod. "You'd be right." They stood in silence a moment, both staring at the vending machine, as though daring it to try misbehaving again. "How long have you known Rebecca?" Rhonda asked. Victor shook his head. "Today was the first time I met her, but I've known 1,000 women like her, working themselves into the ground, carrying everyone else's burdens and still treated like they're nothing." His gaze darkened. "We see this kind of thing more than we want to, so we make it our business not to let it stand." Rhonda looked over at him with newfound respect. "That's not how people usually see bikers." Victor chuckled. "People believe whatever's easiest. Leather and motorcycles make us villains. But the ones in suits, they walk free while leaving bodies behind them. Not always literally, but lives crushed just the same." His words sparked something deep in Rhonda's mind. The world had always judged her too. First as a fighter, then as someone they tried to force into retirement before she was ready. They thought they knew everything from the outside. Fame didn't protect you from judgment. Sometimes it amplified it. "You know," Rhonda began carefully, "once this goes public, he's going to hate the fact that it's me telling the story." Victor smiled without joy. "Good. Let him hate it." Just then, a small voice echoed down the hall. "Grandma?" Rhonda turned to see a little boy gripping the handles of a rolling IV pole. His hospital bracelet hung loosely on his thin wrist. Pale skin, large frightened eyes, but determination in the way he stood. Danny. His gaze searched desperately until it found her. Rhonda lowered herself to meet him at eye level. "You must be Danny," she said softly. He nodded but didn't smile. "Someone called from the school. They said Grandma's here because a man hurt her. They said she's okay, but it sounded bad. Is she okay? I need to see her. Please." His breath became shaky, fear threatening to overwhelm him. Rhonda rested her hands gently on his shoulders. "She's okay," she assured him. "She's resting right now. She's hurt, but the doctors say she'll heal." Danny clung to her sleeve. "She's all I have." Rhonda's chest tightened. She understood the fear of losing your whole world in one person. "You're not alone," she told him. "She's not alone either." Danny looked at the bikers behind her. His eyes widened at the sight of their jackets and tattoos. Usually a child would step back. He didn't. Instead, he whispered, "Are you here to protect Grandma?" Victor knelt too, meeting the boy's gaze with surprising gentleness. "We are," he said simply, "and we're here to protect you too." For the first time, a flicker of relief crossed Danny's face. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." Rhonda led him back toward the recovery room. Danny hesitated at the doorway, bracing himself. When he stepped inside, his eyes filled instantly at the sight of Rebecca in bandages. He rushed to her bedside, clutching her hand gently, terrified of hurting her. Her eyes opened slowly and a tired but loving smile curved beneath the gauze. "There's my boy," she whispered, voice dry and strained. Danny tried to speak but couldn't. He bent forward instead, resting his head carefully near her shoulder. Her hand trembled as she stroked his hair. Rhonda watched them quietly from the doorway, her resolve solidifying. This wasn't going to end with an apology or a fine. This was going to end with justice, people would feel. But miles away, someone else had reached the same conclusion, from the opposite side of morality. Richard sat with his newly arrived attorney in a private interview room. The lawyer flipped through a fresh pile of printed headlines, each one worse than the last. "National news picked this story up already," the lawyer muttered. "And because Ronda Rousey was involved." "Why is she involved at all?" Richard hissed. "She's some washed-up fighter desperate for attention." The lawyer lifted his eyes slowly. "She's a world champion, a bestseller, a public figure whose voice carries weight. And right now, she is the reason you are losing this battle." Richard's fist curled. "This is slander. She attacked me first." "Video proves otherwise," the lawyer interrupted sharply. "You need to stop talking like you're invincible. It's killing your case." Richard forced himself to inhale through flared nostrils. He smoothed his suit, regaining some composure. "Then fix it. We're working on a media statement, something apologetic, compassionate. If the woman, her name is irrelevant," Richard snapped. The lawyer stared at him long and hard. "That," he said, "is your real problem." Richard leaned back, but unease lingered beneath his facade. He wasn't used to being the villain in the story, even though he had always been one. The claws of consequence were finally reaching him. But narcissists never go quietly. Back at the hospital, evening shadows stretched through the hallway windows as Rhonda gathered with the bikers one more time before visiting hours ended. Danny wouldn't leave the hospital, curling up in a recliner beside Rebecca's bed as she slept. Rhonda made sure a nurse kept watch in case he needed anything. The bikers began discussing what would come next. Not fury, but strategy. "We'll rotate staying here overnight," Hammer said. "No press, no harassment. Anyone tries, we stop them." "We're also starting a fundraiser," another added. "Medical bills for the boy, too. We'll make sure he gets what he needs long term." Rhonda nodded. "I'll reach out to some organizations. This story will rally people. There are good ones out there who want to help." Victor studied her. "You okay? You've taken a lot on today." Rhonda blew out a slow breath. "I'm not okay. I don't think I should be, but I'm exactly where I need to be." Victor smiled slightly. "Then we've got the right person on our side." As night settled in, Rhonda allowed herself a few minutes of solitude on a bench outside the hospital entrance. The air was crisp, carrying distant city noise. She closed her eyes, letting adrenaline drain slowly. Her fists, still raw from contact with the table during the confrontation, flexed involuntarily. She whispered to herself, voice low and determined, "He doesn't get to walk through life untouched anymore." A sudden flash illuminated her face, headlights pulling into the emergency lane. Two men stepped out in tailored suits, wearing the smug expressions of men who believed they owned the world. Reporters. Someone had leaked the location. Rhonda rose to her feet, muscles tensing. The men approached quickly, microphones already raised. "Rhonda! Rhonda! Is it true you physically assaulted a businessman today?" one asked, smile sharp like a blade. What do you say to rumors that this was all staged for publicity? The other added. Ronda took one step closer, close enough that they finally realized they were challenging a fighter, and not just any fighter. Her voice was calm, too calm. You're not going inside. If you take one more step toward that door, I will make sure you regret it. That woman in there has suffered enough today, and you will not use her for a headline. The reporters hesitated, briefly, before one shoved forward again. We have a right to the story. Ronda's eyes narrowed. You'll get your story when she's ready. Now leave. Her presence alone pushed them back, like wolves sensing a lion. She didn't raise a fist. She didn't need to. Inside, Rebecca lay sleeping, unaware of the war raging on her behalf. But when dawn came, the world would know. Someone had hurt a grandmother who only ever cared for others. Someone had burned a fighter's friend, and that fighter was about to show him what pain really felt like. The clock was ticking, retribution was coming, and Ronda Rousey would deliver it personally. The morning sun filtered through the tall hospital windows, casting long stripes of gold across the polished floor. Nurses whispered as they moved from room to room, exchanging soft smiles with Danny, who sat watching cartoons in a chair beside his grandmother's bed. Rebecca was awake, her eyelids still heavy, but her mind clearer than the day before. She held Danny's small hands gently, stroking his knuckles with her thumb as he chatted about school and superheroes, trying to distract her from the pain. Outside her door, Ronda and Victor stood at the nurse's station, reviewing paperwork and discussing the security measures they had put in place. Reporters were relentless, the story spreading like wildfire across social media. Ronda's manager had arranged a public statement, carefully crafted to protect Rebecca's dignity while exposing the truth of the assault. Yet the pressure from the media only amplified Richard Pembroke's arrogance. His lawyers are spinning the story already, Victor muttered, scrolling through his phone. They're saying you attacked him first. Ronda sighed through her nose, jaw tightening. Let them. Cameras don't lie, and neither will she. Just then, the elevator chimed. A pair of sharply dressed individuals stepped out, Richard's lawyers, flanking a visibly shaken Richard Pembroke. He'd swapped out his ruined suit for one freshly pressed, but he couldn't hide the exhaustion etched beneath his eyes. The bright hospital lighting revealed tiny tremors in his fingers, a twitch in his jaw. His eyes darted around anxiously, searching for control in a place where he had none. His lawyers approached Detective Alvarez first. Papers shuffled, voices feigned politeness. Richard hung back, but his gaze drifted toward Rebecca's door. Ronda saw it, the way his posture shifted, as though he still believed this place belonged to him, as though he could buy his way through the world, even now. She stepped between him and the hallway leading to Rebecca's room. You're not going anywhere near her, she said, voice firm and low. Richard straightened, trying to reclaim the bravado he once carried like armor. I came to apologize, he replied, the corners of his lips curling as if the word tasted sour. It's what my legal counsel advised. You don't get to look her in the eyes after what you did, Ronda answered. She doesn't need your performance. Richard's gaze sharpened, anger flashing momentarily. He masked it with a condescending smirk. You're making this worse with your involvement. I don't care who you are. You had no right to physically assault. Assault? Ronda stepped closer, her shadow overlapping his. You threw scalding liquid into a grandmother's face because she didn't serve you fast enough. That's not an incident. That's abuse, and hateful abuse at that. Richard's reply stuttered. I lost control for a moment. That moment disfigured her, Ronda snapped. Victor, watching closely, took a step forward. Not threatening, simply present. The bikers nearby all straightened as one, arms crossed like human barricades. Richard's lawyers intervened quickly, realizing the atmosphere was one spark away from ignition. Mr. Pembroke needs to leave, one of them whispered urgently. But Richard wasn't ready to retreat. His pride, the only thing he valued more than power, was bleeding. This is ridiculous, he hissed. I just need to convince them this isn't who I am. Ronda didn't raise her voice. She didn't lunge. She simply spoke truths he wasn't built to withstand. Your entire life is built on stepping on people like her. Yes, it is who you are, and the world finally sees it. His expression cracked, a hairline fracture in his perfectly curated persona. Shame flickered across his face, but it was quickly replaced by venom. "You'll regret standing against me," Richard muttered through clenched teeth. Rhonda's eyes narrowed with a chilling calm. "Not a chance." Detective Alvarez stepped in then, citing safety regulations and restraining orders. Richard was escorted away, his threats trailing behind him like smoke from a dying fire. But he didn't leave quietly. Just before disappearing into the elevator, he turned, jabbing a finger toward Rhonda. "This isn't over." He meant it as a warning. Rhonda heard it as a challenge. Hours passed. Reporters were finally driven from the building. Police presence increased. Rebecca rested while Danny curled beside her, reading a picture book. The calm seemed to settle once more, until the calm broke. It was later in the evening when a nurse hurried to Rhonda, panic in her eyes. "We have a problem. Rebecca's son, Danny's father, he's here, and he wants to take the boy." Rhonda's eyes widened. "Take him? Where? He didn't say. He doesn't seem sober." Rhonda's heartbeat switched pace instantly. Danny's father, a ghost whose absence had always cast a shadow, now appeared like a storm cloud ready to rip the fragile piece apart. When she reached the reception area, she saw him, unshaven, stumbling forward, breath thick with alcohol. Security staff tried to reason with him, but he shoved one aside. "I'm his father," he shouted. "I have rights. Give me my son." Danny's terrified face appeared behind Rhonda. He clung to her, shaking. Rebecca had warned Rhonda in fragments about the man: addiction, abandonment, manipulation. Rhonda stepped into the father's path, voice firm. "Danny stays with his grandmother. You need help before you can take care of yourself, let alone him." "You think you get to decide?" he spat. "You don't know anything about my life." "I know she's the one who never left him," Rhonda said sharply, "and you're the one who did." He lunged. Bad decision. Rhonda moved faster than thought, one arm up, redirecting his momentum, a swift twist sending him to his knees. She restrained him without harm, but he howled dramatically, calling for a lawyer, for police, for anyone who would believe him. The officers already present placed him in custody gently but firmly. He continued screaming obscenities as they removed him from the building. Danny crushed his face into Rhonda's side, sobbing. She crouched down, holding him close until the trembling stopped. "You're safe," she whispered. "I promise." And she meant it. Later, as Danny slept once more beside Rebecca, Rhonda sat in a quiet corner of the waiting area with Victor. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The vending machine glowed like a small, untrustworthy moon. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You've taken on more than most would. Why? You barely knew her this morning." Rhonda took a deep breath, thinking carefully before answering. "I know what it feels like to be alone, to be underestimated, to be hurt by someone who thought they could decide your worth for you." She rubbed her knuckles absently. "And I know I can help. That's enough." Victor nodded. "You're a good person, Rhonda." She smirked lightly. "Some would argue with you." "Only fool," he replied. Silence settled again, but this time it was comfortable, like allies catching their breath before the next fight, and the next fight was already waiting. Later that night, while the hospital slept beneath the hum of machines and soft footsteps, a shadow slunk through the parking lot. A figure dressed in black moved toward the rear entrance, hunched and frantic. A driver waited in a car nearby, engine running. Richard Pembroke. Bail had barely processed, yet here he was. Not to apologize, not to reflect, but to take back control the only way he knew how, through intimidation. He slipped inside with stolen credentials, creeping through the sterile corridors like a rat searching for crumbs of dominance. He made it to the recovery wing before security intercepted him. But security wasn't the only line of defense. Rhonda stepped from around the corner, as if she had been expecting him the entire time. Her eyes held no hesitation, no doubt. "You just couldn't accept consequences, could you?" Richard froze. His bravado faltered as he realized who stood between him and his intended victim. He turned to flee, but the bikers appeared behind him like a wall of leather and resolve. What was the plan? Rhonda asked, her voice resonating in the enclosed hallway. Tear off her bandages? Scare her into silence? Hurt her even more? Richard's lip quivered. I came to help. Rhonda stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking one step at a time. You hurt someone who has nothing. You tried to bully her even after being caught. And now you're creeping through a hospital like a coward in the night. Richard's back hit the wall. No more cameras, Rhonda said quietly. No more lawyers. No more excuses. Her fist connected with his sternum before he could react. A controlled, punishing strike. Air rushed from his lungs as he crumpled, gasping and clutching his ribs. She grabbed his collar and pulled him close enough to whisper, You will never come near her again. You will never speak her name again. If you do, I swear I will make you feel every ounce of pain you have ever inflicted. Richard trembled, tears spilling from his eyes. It wasn't the pain that broke him. It was finally realizing someone stronger stood in front of him and wouldn't yield. Rhonda released him, and he collapsed to the floor. Security rushed forward, cuffing him once more. As they dragged him away, Richard looked up at her, utterly defeated. You'll pay for this, he croaked. Rhonda didn't flinch. No, she said. You will. He was taken out the doors, the engine of the waiting car roaring as he was driven off into the night. Victor approached Rhonda, arms over his chest, admiration clear in his expression. That was satisfying, he said. Rhonda shrugged, cracking her knuckles lightly. He'll think twice before hurting someone again. Victor smirked. If he thinks at all. They shared a quiet laugh, one filled with relief and triumph. As the hallway emptied and silence returned, Rhonda glanced back toward Rebecca's room. Inside slept a grandmother who finally wasn't alone, a boy who finally wasn't afraid, and a fighter who finally remembered exactly who she was, someone who stood up for those who couldn't, someone who didn't let cruelty win, someone who fought for justice when the world looked away. In the stillness of the hospital night, Ronda Rousey made one final vow. This was only the beginning. The world would know what real strength looked like. Tomorrow, the reckoning would continue. The morning after Richard's second arrest brought with it a renewed sense of calm. The sunlight that spilled through the hospital windows was softer than before, as though the world itself understood that healing needed gentleness. Rhonda stepped quietly into Rebecca's room and found Danny curled up beside his grandmother, asleep with his head rested carefully on her blanket-covered arm. Rebecca watched him with a tired but loving smile, her bandaged face glowing beneath the warm light. "Good morning," Rhonda said softly, pulling up a chair. Rebecca's voice was rough but steadier than the previous night. "Good morning. They told me what you did, what you stopped. You don't have to think about him anymore," Rhonda replied. "You are safe, and so is Danny." Rebecca looked down at the boy's small hand, wrapped around her fingers. "You didn't just protect us from him. You protected us from feeling alone." Her eyes shimmered with quiet emotion. "I hope you know what a gift that is." Rhonda smiled gently. "You'd do the same for someone else. You already do. Every single day." Rebecca shook her head, humbled. "I just serve coffee." "No," Rhonda corrected. "You serve hope. You serve kindness. You serve safety. People like him hate that because it reminds them what they'll never have." Rebecca blinked tears away. "Thank you." Before the moment could deepen further, Danny stirred awake and sat up, rubbing his eyes. When he saw Rhonda, his face lifted with relief. "Is Grandma going to be okay?" he asked. "She's already okay," Rhonda said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "And she's only going to get stronger from here." Danny exhaled, hugging his grandmother carefully, mindful of the bandages. Rebecca's fingers threaded through his hair as she closed her eyes with contentment. Not long after, reporters gathered outside the hospital again. But this time, the energy was different. They weren't hunting scandal. They were waiting to witness justice. With Detective Alvarez's approval, Rhonda prepared to step outside before they could flood the hospital again. She wasn't going to let them intrude on Rebecca or Danny. So she decided to be the one voice the world would hear. As the automatic doors opened, camera shutters clattered in a relentless rhythm. Microphones thrust forward. Questions flew like arrows. Rhonda, can you tell us what happened inside the diner yesterday? How is the victim doing now? Are the rumors true that the suspect attempted to return to the hospital last night? Rhonda lifted her hand, and silence slowly spread across the crowd. She took her place on the steps, shoulders square, face unflinching. She didn't need a stage. She didn't need a ring. Her presence commanded attention all on its own. Yesterday, she began, a woman who has spent her life working hard, caring for others, and loving her family without limits, was attacked for no reason other than someone decided he was entitled to hurt her. Murmurs from the press softened into listening. She was targeted because he believed she was invisible. Someone who didn't matter. Someone without a voice. Rhonda shook her head slowly. But he was wrong. Audio flashes captured every shift in her expression. Strength, anger, resolve. Rebecca Carter matters. Her grandson matters. Her life matters. And no one, I mean no one, will ever make her feel small again. A few cameras dropped slightly, hands lowering out of respect rather than command. You ask what I think of what happened? Rhonda continued. I think we live in a world that too often overlooks the people who hold it together. The workers, the caretakers, the ones who show up every day. They deserve protection and dignity. She paused, letting the weight of her words deepen. We are not going to forget what was done to her. We are not going to allow anyone to twist the story. There is no excuse for cruelty. There is no excuse for hate. Reporters leaned closer, drawn in by the gravity of her conviction. And you can put this on every network, every headline, every screen, Rhonda said, her voice rising. She is not invisible. She never was. And thanks to everyone who stood up for her, she never will be again. Applause broke through the air, not from the media, but from nurses and hospital staff who had gathered behind the barrier, their hands raised in support. Even some reporters joined, the humanity beneath their jobs taking control. Rhonda nodded once, then stepped back inside. The doors closed behind her. Inside the hospital, Rebecca had watched the speech on the small TV mounted to the wall. Danny stood beside her, mouth slightly open as he listened. When Rhonda re-entered the room, he rushed to hug her again. You're a superhero, he whispered into her side. Rhonda chuckled beside a wave of emotion. No, superheroes wear capes. I'm just someone who won't let bullies win. Later, Victor and the bikers joined them. They brought flowers, stuffed animals for Danny, and a folder full of updates, including good news. The fundraiser we launched last night has already raised more than $25,000, Victor told Rebecca. That covers all your medical bills and Danny's next round of treatment. Rebecca gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears streamed down her good cheek. I don't know how to thank you, she cried. You don't need to thank us, Victor said, his voice warm but firm. We're family now. That's what family does. Danny tugged at Rebecca's sleeve. Grandma, we don't have to worry anymore. Rebecca nodded, overwhelmed, and hugged him tightly. The bikers shifted awkwardly, wiping their eyes when no one looked directly at them. Later that afternoon, Rhonda escorted Danny to the cafeteria for lunch while Rebecca rested. He picked out chicken nuggets, mashed potatoes, and a chocolate milk. When they sat down, he studied her silently for a moment, then asked, Will you keep being our friend after Grandma gets better? Rhonda leaned back in her chair with a soft smile. I was your friend the moment you told me you loved your grandma. That doesn't just go away. Danny grinned wide, relief radiating from his entire being. And could I see you fight one day? He asked shyly. Rhonda laughed for real this time. Absolutely. Danny tapped his chin thoughtfully. Can you teach me how to do that thing? Where you grab a bad guy and make them say sorry? Rhonda smiled. Maybe not that exactly, but I can show you how to stand tall, how to protect yourself and others without hurting anyone unless you absolutely have to. Danny nodded seriously. I want to protect Grandma too. You already do, Rhonda said. Every time you love her. Back upstairs, Detective Alvarez returned with more news. Reassuring news. Judge approved a no-contact order, she informed them, and prosecutors are adding felony stalking charges for last night's incident. Rebecca shut her eyes in relief. The weight she carried for so long finally lifted, not entirely gone, but light enough to breathe again. As evening descended, Ronda took Rebecca's hand gently. You will have scars, she said honestly, but they won't define you. They'll remind the world what you survived, what you fought through, and what you overcame. Rebecca inhaled, emotions tightening her throat. I'm alive, and I'm not hiding anymore. Ronda nodded proudly. Exactly. The bikers gathered near the room's exit, preparing to leave for the night. Victor approached Rebecca and placed an envelope on the bedside table. What's this? She asked. A new beginning, he replied. Inside was a letter from the diner's owner, an apology for failing to protect her sooner, a guarantee of full pay during her recovery, and a promise of a management position once she healed enough to return. Attached was a business card for a local attorney specializing in workers' rights, already paid for. Rebecca looked up at Victor, unable to speak. We're not done helping, he said. Not as long as you want us around. Rebecca nodded, tears falling freely. I want you around, she whispered. Danny crawled into her arms again, hugging them both as much as his little arms could manage. As the night quieted, Ronda stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. Stars dotted the sky above the parking lot, tiny reminders of how wide and full the world could still be, even after cruelty. Victor joined her. He'll be in prison for a long time, Victor said, leaning against his bike. But even if he wasn't, he won't forget what you did, Ronda smirked. Good. You know, Victor added, most people wouldn't have gone all in like you did. It wasn't your fight. It is now, Ronda replied, because she is my friend. Victor nodded slowly. And we're yours. Anytime. A gust of wind carried the chill of dusk through the air, brushing Ronda's hair back as she looked toward the city skyline. So, Victor asked, kicking the ground softly. What now? Ronda smiled. Small, determined, ready. Now, she said, we live, we protect, we stay loud, and we fight again when we have to. Victor chuckled. Sounds like a plan. They stood together for a while longer. Two warriors who had found purpose in protecting someone who had never expected to become a symbol. Inside, Rebecca slept peacefully with Danny curled at her side. Outside, the world was beginning to change, because one cruel man failed to realize the strength of people united, and because one fighter decided enough was enough. Ronda Rousey walked back into the hospital, leaving the cold night behind her. Tomorrow, the healing would continue. Tomorrow, the world would still be watching. Tomorrow, kindness would be the stronger force, and justice, real justice, would finally prevail.